Okay, on the back side of our notes, now we focus on principal of values. Okay, so principal values pretty much limit us to just one answer per question. Okay, so on the previous section, you had multiple answers or possibly 3 answers, 2 answers, or just one. Now, whenever you're doing a problem that has these capital letters, okay, so notice the capital A, capital C, you're only going to have one answer. Okay, so I'm going to tell you guys which quadrants you're going to limit yourself to, and we'll talk about why it is next class. So if you were to have a capital sign, capital S, capital inverse sign, or capital A, arc sign, you're only going to focus on quadrants 1 and 4. Okay, do not choose any angles from quadrants 2 or 3. In addition, instead of saying, oh, we're going from 0 all the way to 2 pi, since I can't pass through quadrant 2 or 3, the only way to get to quadrant 4 would be counterclockwise. So if this is 0, and I go, it's going clockwise. This is 0, and I go clockwise, this would be negative pi over 2. Okay, and if I want to go up here, I'm going to go in the positive direction, so this is positive pi over 2. So the lesson here is pretty much if they ask for principal value sign, your answers have to be from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. Okay? Now you're probably wondering, well, how does that limit us to just one angle? If we think about it, in quadrant 1, these are all the positive sine values. Okay, so these are all the positive sine values. Okay, while in quadrant 4, all the sine values down here are going to be negative. Okay, now if I go on to cosine. Okay, so capital C cosine or arc cosine, capital A. Okay, let's think about it here. Here's 0. Okay, if I say just quadrant 1 and 4, that doesn't make sense because both quadrant 1 and 4 have positive cosines. Okay, so what we're going to limit ourselves is going to be from 0 to 1 pi. Okay, we're going to take out quadrant 3 and 4 for cosine. Okay, this makes sense because in quadrant 1, cosine is positive. However, in quadrant 2, cosine is negative. Okay, so here your possible answers are going to be in between 0 and pi. Alright, lastly, if you have to evaluate with principal values for inverse tangent with a capital T or capital A arctan, okay, this one is going to follow suit with the principal values for sine. Okay, so here's 0. We're going to take away quadrant 2 and 3. This will be negative pi over 2, positive pi over 2. Okay? And it makes sense in this case because we're going to go ahead and have positive tangent values here, negative tangent values there. So your answers, whenever they ask for principal values for tangent, are going to be in between negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. Alright, so let's actually start getting into evaluating problems, okay? So here I have arc sine of negative 1/2, okay? So I'm going to focus on just this. So I'm going to draw this out. No quadrant 2 or 3. Since it's a negative sine value, it's got to be in quadrant 4, okay? So now I'm looking at my reference angle chart, okay? Sine of what angle would give me 1/2? Well, that's pi over 6. What will give me negative 1/2? Well, it's going to have the same reference angle, and since I have to go in the clockwise fashion, this will be negative pi over 6. So my final answer here is negative pi over 6. Okay, now we have principal values for inverse cosine of negative 1/2. So let's go ahead and take a look. Automatically cross out quadrant 3 and 4. Okay, since it's negative cosine, that means it's going to be in quadrant 2. Okay, I'm looking at my reference angle chart. Okay, cosine of what angle would give me positive 1/2? That would be pi over 3. Okay, but pi over 3 is in the first quadrant. So how do I get this angle that's in the second quadrant? Remember, this is 0. This is pi, or 3 pi over 3. So what I have to do is take away 1 pi over 3, and that would give me 2 pi over 3, which is my answer. All right, let's look at number 3. Arc cosine of root 2 over 2. So again, take out quadrant 3 and 4. It's a positive, so that's going to be quadrant 1. All I'm going to do is take a look at my reference angle chart. Cosine of what angle would give me root 2 over 2? Pi over 4. Okay? Anytime you have an angle in your first quadrant, it's always going to be your reference angle. So, am I done? I am. Pi over 4 is my answer. Okay? Now you're going to jump down to some questions where it might be a little tricky. Remember how we talked about if you have sine or cosine of 0, 1, or -1, it's going to be those quadrantal angles. So if I have principal values, capital S, okay, principal value inverse sine of 0, remember you're going to cross out for principal values of sine, quadrant 2 and 3, I'm left with these quadrantal angles to choose from. Okay, I'm trying to figure out which of these quadrantal angles would give me a y value, since it's sine, of 0. So let's take a look. This is 0, 1, not that one. This is 1, 0. Yep, that should be it. And this one down here is 0, -1. So the only one that gives me a y value of 0 would be this angle, which is at 0. Okay. All right, so if I were to look at number 6, okay, this is principal values of cosine, so take out 3 and 4. I'm limited to here, here, and here. So my ordered pairs here are going to be 1, 0, 0, 1, and -1, 0. What this problem is asking me to do is figure out which angles would allow you to have a x value, so cosine's x value, of 0. So not at 0, at pi over 2, I do have an x value of 0, and not at pi. So the only answer I have over here is pi over 2. All right. Now some of us probably would be asking, like, how do you do number 4? Arc tangent of -1. This tangent, if it's 1 or -1, that one's not so bad. So let's take a look. Okay, tangent with a capital A, arctan with capital A means I discount, go ahead and take out quadrant 2 and 3. Since it's negative, we're going to go down here because that's where tangent's negative. My reference angle, let's take a look at your reference angle. Tangent of what would give you 1? Pi over 4. So to go here, we're going to have to go clockwise. So my answer here is going to be -pi over 4. All right, go ahead and try out 7 through 11 and check your answers on Blackboard.